Hello and welcome to Adventures with Words, where we explore storytelling in all its forms. I'm Rob.
I'm Kate.
And we're back this week with what has been for us a rather busy week, actually.
Certainly has, quite action-packed. Rob's been out and about during the day at London Book Fair, among other things, and we've also been along to a Vintage Books and Waterstones kind of booksellers evening, but some of the people who contribute to the Waterstones blog as bloggers were invited as well. So, and I was there as a blogger, so that was really nice with a couple of friends. So went along to that as well. And so we'll be telling you about those. And then Rob, you also went along and met Jonathan Safran Foer, who people might know as the author of a couple of very well-known novels. I haven't actually read them myself, but I know you have.
So I started the week off on Monday night with a very kind invite from Penguin to go and meet Jonathan Safran Foer. Now, I'd read Everything is Illuminated at university. I think it was a set text. So that would have been, dare I say, about 10 years ago, possibly like that. He's also written Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, which was adapted into a film.
Yeah, with Tom
Hanks. I
Hanks.
got that name right.
Does it have Tom Hanks in
I don't know, actually. I didn't see it. I haven't read it. Possibly. Anyway, he's also written some non-fiction Eating Animals, but he was here in the UK for the London Book Fair, which I'll get to in a moment. But it was at the Society Club Soho, which, if you didn't know, it's kind of like a private members club for a bookshop. It's possibly the easiest way of describing it. It's quite a tiny venue. There's an art gallery downstairs. It's basically a bookshop that's filled with first editions, and it's got a bar.
Nice.
I think it's about 120 quid a year to be a member.
But obviously you didn't have to join to go along.
I did not. No.
Thankfully, from a bank balance.
It's a free invite. I think that's quite cheap, actually, for a members club, possibly.
I wouldn't know,
but I've heard things a lot more expensive. Anyway, it was very, very intimate affair. They've got a lovely Labrador dog that just wanders around.
Aww.
Occasionally she barks to be let out. Jonathan was over. He was a bit jet lagged because he only arrived that morning, and I think he was going to go on to do some other press. But he read a very brief section from his book, which is called Here I Am. And I've got a limited edition advanced proof copy. Out of pure luck, Jonathan, my colleague, handed it to me, and it's number 4 of 200.
Wow, cool.
That's all right. So the book itself, I got sent the first chapter as a PDF to read before we went, but it turns out it wasn't quite the first chapter. It was sort of slightly further in. But I'll read you from the back. For the Block family, it's supposed to be a time of joy. Soon they'll come together to celebrate their eldest son's bar mitzvah, except that he's just done something so unspeakable the whole thing might have to be called off. For screenwriter and dad Jacob, it's further proof of his incompetence as a parent. For mum Julia, an architect slumming it as an interior designer, it's a reminder of the sacrifices of motherhood. For younger brothers Max and Benji, it is obvious that all adults are idiots. And for the eldest son Sam, it's time to ask if he's truly ready to be a man. The part I read, the PDF, was when the parents are called in to the school to discuss what their son may or may not have done, which involves writing certain unsuitable phrases and words onto the desk. I think it's the desk. And this sort of sets forth that the parents are sort of become divided and his bar mitzvah is at risk. That's about as far as I've got, because then we got the rest that evening. And Jonathan read a very brief part from the book. I'm told it's very funny, and there's a lot goes on in its pages. It's about 560. It looks smaller than it is. So I remember from reading Everything's Illuminated at uni, really enjoyed it. So I'm actually really, quite looking forward to this one. It's not out until September. So it's arrived nice and early, so I'll be reading that. But the actual venue itself, if you ever get to go in without having to pay the money, it's a really small, really nice, intimate place. I could see on the shelves there were first editions of things like American Psycho, Martin Amis, things like that. It's just, you could stand and just look at the shelves for a long while. And we had Here I Am cocktails. They'd gone through and made these special cocktails. the next day my head was a tiny bit fuzzy from them. But it was really good fun. I don't know what else Jonathan did during the week, but I think he was just meeting some press, and I had the briefest of brief chats with him. I asked him, as an author, when he's writing, how does he know when it's done, when the book is finished? And he said on the plane over, he was still making edits to this one, and he doesn't go back and read any of his work because he would just keep finding things that he wants to change and correct and so forth. So I had a great time.
Cool. That sounds really interesting. And then you went on to go to the London Book Fair, didn't you? So, I mean, I've been to the London Book Fair, and we probably talked about this on the podcast at the time, I imagine. So a couple of years ago, we both actually went along for the day and went to a couple of talks each. I'm sure we did talk about this on the podcast, actually. And we went along to a talk where some people who are now quite well-known book vloggers actually talked about what they were doing. And this is when the whole kind of book vlogging thing was just really getting going as something that people did. But yeah, BookTube wasn't really that well-known then, and now is much, much bigger. And we also went along to a talk where there was a guy talking about redesigning Harry Potter covers, and they were really beautiful, actually. He talked about doing these woodcut covers. We've always tried to look out for those, actually, because they're really stunning, and you can get them, but they tend to be shelved with adult kind of grown-up fantasy books rather than in the children's section, which is a top tip if you want some really nice like a really nice set of Harry Potter books with a different cover. Have a look out for those ones. But then really what we found at the time, which I guess is probably what you found again, is that it's just a really, really busy thing to go to. And although the talks are interesting, generally it is kind of a business thing. But it was in a different place, wasn't it, to when we went?
Yes, so you and I had gone to Earl's Court, which I believe now been knocked down?
Yeah.
It's all gone?
Yeah.
Earl's Court is a sort of a series of vast halls. Of exhibition space. And this year it was in Olympia, which I'd never been to, which is probably best known for its giant sort of curved glass dome of a roof. What it means is it's essentially I found myself inside a glorified greenhouse, as it was incredibly warm. I felt almost like after about an hour just dehydrated and worn down.
Oh, no.
The main halls where all the bigger publishers are incredibly busy, and then it's quite deceptive because you've got upstairs as well, and the passageways between the halls are a little bit hard to find. But as an event goes, I went mostly to see the authors talking. There's the English Pen Literary Salon, which is just free to turn up to, and there's a series of authors there who are doing talks. On the first day, Julian Fellows was there, him of Downton Abbey. He's got Belgravia, which is going to come out first as an app, and it's being released sort of in Dickensian style, where a chapter will be released, I think it's every week, the story, and it's an app, and you pay as you go along. It's also going to be released as a hardback afterwards. He was down for half an hour to talk. It ended up being about 10 minutes. It was interesting, but it wasn't quite as full on as you were hoping for.
Yeah.
That was also followed by Max Porter. Grief is a feathered thing, or
grief is a thing with feathers.
Grief is the word, or grief, one of those. That was really interesting because basically he was talking about he's written a book which is kind of really hard to classify, as a bookseller they found that quite funny. And he's a former bookseller. They found that quite amusing. It's like I was trying to think about where would we categorise it in a shop sort of thing. And he was talking about the relationship that he had with his younger brother, and how that relates to the book. The role of sort of Ted Hughes that isn't quite Ted Hughes in the book. It was a really good half-hour chat that he sat down with. It certainly made me want to read the book because I haven't got around to reading that yet. But that was absolutely fascinating. So that was on my first day there, and a lot of that was partly me trying to find my way around.
Yeah, because it's so massive, isn't it? All
huge.
The different stands. It's a bit of a maze, I recall.
It's a complete maze. The whole children's section is upstairs. There's sort of there's the Ivy that you can go and have dinner at. There's sort of a pop-up Ivy restaurant. There was a hot chocolate called the Chocolate Factory stand. There were also seminars, and in the afternoon of the first day, I went to a seminar which is all about how to get books trending on Twitter. And they had a few names such as Kathy Renson-Brink, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago with talking at the Welcome Brunch, Nikesh Shukla. There was also Dan Dalton from BuzzFeed.
BuzzFeed Books, yeah.
Some colleagues, I say your colleagues, but people from PRH, from Cornerstone, talking about the global campaign for Go Set a Watchman.
Yeah, so that was Emma Finnegan and Charlotte Bush.
Yes, I'm glad you remember that. That was very much a more industry talk. Then I went back the next day with our good friend Simon Savage Reed. So we went to a few more talks, Deborah Levy and Jeanette Winterson. Yeah, so because there's the whole thing at the book fair this year is to do with the fact that it's 400 years of Shakespeare. Yep. So there's that anniversary. So there was a bit of a Shakespeare theme on one of the days at London Book Fair. So Jeanette Winterson was there talking about the Gap of Time and the Hogarth Shakespeare project that Vintage is doing. So I kind of knew a bit about that. We were hoping that Howard Jacobson was going to be there, but he wasn't feeling very well, so decided not to go. Kind of understandable. Not a great place to be when it's boiling hot in there if you're not feeling that great. If you're not to 100%.
Yeah, exactly. No. So we thought, fair enough, Howard, no problem. I think he's fine, but just he wasn't feeling that fab. So, but Jeanette Winson went along and did a fantastic job because she's a brilliant speaker.
Well, before that, we had Deborah Levy talking about Hot Milk, which is a book I really want to read now. We've got a copy. She really convinced, it was she was very convincing, certainly one that I want to read. And she's talking about the inspiration from the book, where it sort of came from. This character of a doctor / she described him as like a shaman, sort of a bit of a dodgy doctor, was a character that she'd always wanted to write about for quite some time. But as Kate said, then Jeanette Winterson was there kind of doing like stand-up. She wasn't in conversation with anyone. Yeah. She sort of just got up, stood up, talked about the book for quite a while, and then when she was reading, there's this brilliant sort of audio element. So it's quite subtle to start with. She starts reading, and then you've got the sound of rain comes in, and then you've got thunder and lightning. There's also a car crash. Yeah, I guess does she always read from the same part?
Yeah, so she's got this reading that she does from The Gap of Time, which is she has described it as a cover version of The Winter's Tale. So it's her kind of interpretation, and it's in a modern setting, but it also is following the story of The Winter's Tale. And it's still got some kind of magical, fantastical elements, but she has this soundscape, and so her reading has the soundscape in the background. And that was actually created by Will Rycroft, who some listeners might know of as previously from the book blogging world, but he's actually the kind of community manager for Vintage Books. So he's the guy behind the Vintage Books Twitter and YouTube channel, if you watch that as well. And he created this incredible soundscape with her. So he would be there in the office with his headphones on, and he'd be finding all these amazing background sounds for her and kind of stitching them all together. So now she has this amazing sound that she has going in the background. And at one point he was trying to choose the right kind of rap track to be playing, so it sounds a bit like at one point a car pulls up and music is playing from the car, and he was trying to find the right rap track so you could play it in the theatre and there wouldn't be anything too offensive in the lyrics.
I see, yes. I didn't really notice that.
But yes, but you see, it's so subtle. It's so subtle.
Well, it's really good because sometimes author readings can either be too long or too short. They can drag on a bit. This one really kept you intrigued because there was a whole other element. I mean, she does a fantastic reading anyway, but there's this sort of whole other element. Like, I think I'd heard you talking about this one, but I'd forgotten that this was going to happen. But But yeah, it was really good read. Basically, every author I went to go and see, I now want to read their book, so they've done a good job there. And then after that, we went and did some mingling. So we've, for those of you who remember that Kate and I did some work and covered the Fiction Uncovered Prize. Mm-hmm. We caught up with some of them. We were on the stand there. It's sort of strange. You're in the middle of an exhibition hall, just sort of sipping champagne. A nice juxtaposition. They had the world's most hideous carpet. If any of you saw the tweet that I sent out, just imagine having to walk through halls like it's with a green screen. That sort of bright fluorescent green.
It did look pretty horrendous.
It was pretty horrendous, but it was good fun. I'd say if you're thinking of going next year, think about what you actually want to go for and what element. It's not a massive free for all for books. If you're thinking that you might be, you're a reader or a blogger, if you haven't got meetings with the main publishers, you're not going to really get to talk to them. The majority of the people there will be in sales, I would say.
Yeah,
it's about accurate.
So. You might know quite a few people, especially if you are a blogger. You might know quite a few people. You might chat to them quite regularly on Twitter, and you might know that they're going to be there. But even so, it is often really, really difficult to chat to anybody. And you might be there at the same time as them, but they might almost certainly will, if they're there, be there for a specific purpose. So unless you have a meeting booked in with them, you're probably not going to be able to chat to them, unfortunately, which is a bit of a shame. But there's so many people who are only there for that time at London Book Fair who just come specifically for that. Then unfortunately they probably just have to do that. But having said that, if you're thinking about getting into publishing and this coincides with some time off that you might have, it's actually quite worth going. There's quite a lot of really good talks, kind of professional development type things. So there's the SYP, which is the Society of Young Publishers, and they often run some good talks. The PPC, which is the... let me get this right. Publishing Publicity Circle, and there's also the BMS, which is the Book Marketing Society. So they were running some joint talks, which I think was actually what you went along to.
Yes, I realised that when I was on the slide.
Yeah. With Kathy Rensenbrink, Nikesh Shukla. I think there's also some things to do with kind of networking, getting a book published. There was a talk which actually Will Rycroft was one of the people talking about using social media. Quite a few things like that. If you're thinking about getting into various areas of publishing, there's definitely things that you could go along to. If you are an author or an aspiring author, there are definitely talks that you could go along to that you would find helpful. So if you are in that publishing world or you're trying to get into it, there are definitely things that would be useful. And actually, the tickets to go along are not particularly expensive, especially if you buy them in advance.
Buy them in advance. I think it's £35, but that covers you for all 3 days, which is actually pretty good. And then once you're in there, all the talks are included.
Yeah.
So just plan your day out, work out what you're going to see. I can vouch for the SYP stuff. I went to that about 3-4 years ago. Mm-hmm. They do some great stuff, such as how to get into publishing or how to get ahead in publishing.
Yeah.
There's plenty of chances to sort of network. And if you can't go, if you don't live in the UK, then just next year, just look out for the hashtag.
Lots of the talks do get live tweeted, so that's something to think about. And I mean, if you are abroad, if you were in the US, then there are similar fairs in the US that you might be able to go to. Obviously, we aren't able to go to those, but there are definitely US book fairs. If you're in Italy and you're into children's books, then I don't know, maybe look at Bologna.
There's Frankfurt as well.
There's Frankfurt Book Fair. I don't know if they have as strong elements in terms of professional development, but you never know. I mean, London Book Fair didn't have as much a few years ago, and that's really grown, so it's worth having a look.
Yeah, we're quite lucky now. So, but after about a day and a half, I just felt absolutely exhausted. So
you do need to wear comfy shoes.
I wore trainers.
Need to drink a lot of water, definitely. You know, go outside and take regular fresh air breaks. You know, you don't get penalised for going outside and coming back in again. The food inside is more expensive, so it's worth popping out and getting something to eat and coming back in again if you can.
There's a Tesco Express 5 minutes away.
So use that. You know, that's fine. So little things like that are all a good idea.
So on a slightly more relaxed note, on the Thursday night, I didn't have far to go, but at Waterstones Piccadilly, Vintage were hosting an event for, as Kate said, Waterstones booksellers, Waterstones staff, and some selected guests.
Yep.
So do you want to talk us through that one?
Quite often, booksellers don't really get to meet authors. So often, book signings and book launches get held in bookshops. So the bookseller who's arranging it might get to meet the author briefly, but in general, booksellers often don't really get to meet authors very much. So it's quite nice to arrange events where booksellers actually get to meet the people who've written the books that they're selling. And then from a publisher's point of view, obviously, if a bookseller gets to meet the author and gets to hear more about the book, they might be more likely to want to sell the book. So there's that as well.
It's an easier sell if the more information you give a bookseller, the easier it is to sell the customer. Yeah,
exactly. So, and then also, as we mentioned a little while ago, there's a few bloggers who have been invited to contribute every now and then to the Waterstones blog some recommendations of things that they've read lately that they think other people might enjoy. And so they were invited along as well to meet three authors of three novels that are kind of big Chatto novels. So Chatto and Windus is one of the imprints of vintage books. So it's quite a sort of historic name in terms of publishing in London. And there are three novels that have all been, three books rather, that were all being published by Chatto this summer. So the novels are The Girls, which I've talked about before because we've had proofs of this for a long time. And I've told you a bit about that. So Emma Cline, who actually, she lives in California, and she lives in the US, and the book is set in California, but she was over coinciding with London Book Fair again, but she was over to kind of meet some people at London Book Fair, also do some things for Vintage, like kind of film some clips of footage for us, but also to meet Waterstones booksellers and other booksellers. And then someone else who was there was a lady called Kegi Carew, who's written a book called Dadland, which is kind of about her actually getting to know her father very late as he was starting to suffer from dementia, and then discovering that he was actually part of this very almost kind of crazy commando unit during World War II called the Jedburghs. I mean, she knew he was always a bit different, that he was very fond of a practical joke, and he always had this sort of really strange sense of humour. But then she was sort of discovering these secrets about him as he was sort of losing his memories. And then the third author who was there was Rose Tremaine, who's a very well-known author, and she was talking about her 13th novel, which is called The Gustav Sonata, which is the story of two young boys called Gustav and Anton, who are very different. One grows up in a very loving family. He's very kind of emotional. The other, Gustav, is quite kind of tough, and he's grown up in a single parent family, and they're living in Switzerland, and it's around the time of World War II, kind of just around that time, and it's set in it's written in kind of three sections like a sonata, and it's sort of very emotional and heartbreaking. So they were all there. They all talked a bit to the person who was hosting it, who's Alex Clark. And you might know of Alex from her writing in the Guardian book section, and she also does other kind of book reviews and hosts things in other places. And she also sort of jointly presents the Vintage Book podcast as well. So she talked to all of them, and that was really interesting, actually. We heard from Keggy first, who told some quite crazy stories about the kind of practical jokes and things that her dad used to do. This one incredible story about how her dad used to have this old cart, and her dad would actually get her to change the gears, and he would steer with his knees. And they were going down this hill at one point, and he was just steering with his knees, like no hands on the handbrake. And then they got, like, the needle hit 100, and he just turned round to her and shouted "brake" instead of him pressing brake.
I can imagine him being fun, but at the same time a little bit hard work.
A bit, yes, yeah, and also maybe even a bit scary. And then another one where she actually read a section from the book about, I won't spoil it, but she read a section from the book where she had bunked off, basically. She'd not gone to school, and her dad had written her a sick note. But then, there's something very funny. She'd peeked at the sick note, and I won't tell you what the sick note said, but that's very good.
Slightly unorthodox sick note, possibly the easiest one. Yeah.
And I think perhaps he'd realised that she might peek and look at what the note said. So that was very interesting, but it's also quite fascinating hearing about the kind of stuff that her dad had done during the war, that he'd been parachuted into France and been part of starting, kind of getting these revolutionary groups started, and kind of taking out train lines and all sorts, and then actually after that parachuted into Burma, and like these incredibly dangerous missions. And I don't know, it kind of makes you wonder whether his sense of humour is sort of linked. Maybe you have to be a bit mad to do those sort of things.
He wasn't going to blend in Burma.
No, God,
there's no chance of. It's incredibly dangerous. Yeah.
He was so tall, and you just have to go for it and just hope for the best. But yeah, really, really scary. But yeah, did these incredible kind of brave, mad missions and managed to come home safely. But yeah, she obviously didn't really know about this until she started digging into it. So really interesting. But it is also about him then kind of beginning to lose his memories and kind of his dementia, and so it's kind of like a memoir, I guess. And then Emma Klein read from a section of The Girls and was talking about the setting. But I've talked on the podcast about The Girls before. I've read it quite a while ago. Really, really, really enjoyed it. So I won't go into how much I like it again, but I really, really like it. It's out quite soon now. It's out in June. I think it's brilliant. It is a workbook, but even if it wasn't a workbook, I would still say how much I liked it. I really think it sounds brilliant.
I think that's the second time now I've heard Emma speak about this book. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a good summer read. I think it's slightly packaged that way. Dadland sounds absolutely up my alley sort of thing. Slightly bonkers, slightly mad. And that's the first time I've really heard Rose Tremaine speak. So
she read beautifully, incredibly actually.
Good. So all three of those
really
books.
Beautifully.
So I think you can report back that this bookseller here is pretty much convinced by all three. And
then there was a nice goodie bag. So those books were in the goodie bag. And then also the other thing in the goodie bag was a copy of The Strawberry Girl by Lisa Strom, which I guess similar things might be something like The Miniaturist or like The Girl with the Pearl Earring. And this is just out now. And this is all about like the person who has a relationship with the painter Edvard Munch. So the blurb says, summer 1893 in the Norwegian fishing village of Asgard Strand is preparing for the arrival of well-to-do guests and bohemian artists from the city. Local girl Johanna Lean dutifully gathers berries for tourists and poses barefoot for painters as a strawberry girl. When Johanna becomes a maid for the wealthy Elin family, their wayward daughter, Tullik, recruits her as a go-between in her pursuit of the controversial painter Edvard Munch. Before long, Johanna is drawn into the raw emotion of Munch's art and his secret liaison with Tullik. But when she is asked to hide more than just secrets, Johanna must decide whether to take the risk. So, there's that in there as well. It's got a rather lovely photographic cover, but this is one I don't think many people have heard about, and if people enjoyed The Miniaturist or Girl with a Pearl Earring, this is a rather nice debut set in Norway. And Lisa herself is she's so sweet. She's really lovely. They had the actual book has got really beautiful end papers with Edvard Munch paintings on them. So it's rather a nice object.
Well, you've done your plug, but she'll be on the Waterstones blog next week with a video and a Q&A. So there we are. A bit of my plug. Buy it from Waterstones.
So,
buy them all from Waterstones. There you go.
Other bookshops are... We don't even have to say that. I don't know why I'm saying other bookshops are available.
No, there aren't any.
We don't have to say that.
No other bookshops. They're all gone. Sorry.
And then the other thing that was in the goodie bag was some marshmallows.
So I'm looking at them now. This is from a cookbook called The Marshmallowist.
Yes.
When's that one out?
It's out... This is just a great big plug, basically, this podcast, but I don't care because they just look so good. Yeah, it was completely shameless.
So I've got them here in front of me. I've got mango and sweet orange marshmallows, and there's 4 in there. Passion fruit and ginger marshmallows, and finally strawberry and basil marshmallows.
Yeah, I've got some extra ones because I took some home.
These look absolutely huge.
They're enormous.
They're not ones I don't think you'd cook over the fire. You'd want to eat these on their own, I think.
Oh, hell yes. They're so nice. So the cookbook's out in July, and it's by someone called Una Sims, but her business name is The Marshmallowist, and the book is called The Marshmallowist. So she started up as like a pop-up food stall, basically. So she started this pop-up stall on Portobello Road, but she trained as a patissiere in Paris originally, but then she realised that there were lots of people doing that kind of thing, but no one was really doing marshmallows. So she was like, I've got my niche, basically. So that's what she does. These really lovely marshmallows with really, really interesting flavours. One of the things I thought was really interesting in the cookbook is there's a recipe for vegetarian marshmallows.
Right.
So this is actually quite a straightforward recipe. So you don't have to use gelatin. The standard recipes in the book do, but you can swap in the vegetarian marshmallow recipe for the others. So you can just use the other flavours with the vegetarian marshmallow recipe instead. So if you're veggie, you can still make the marshmallows, but just with the veggie version instead, which is nice. And we tried these in the office, and the only way I can describe it is if you imagine the kind of standard marshmallows that you get from the shops, where they've got almost a slightly thick outside, so almost like a kind of crust around the outside, and they're kind of a bit dusty, and then they're sort of springy on the inside. You could kind of stretch them out.
Yeah.
And that's what they're like. And they don't necessarily have that strong a flavour. They've got kind of a vague fruit flavour, but mainly they're just sweet. Whereas with these, they don't have that kind of crusty outside. They're just fluffy all the way through. And when you bite into it, it basically melts in your mouth. It's more like a pudding or mousse. They're amazing, and they just taste of whatever it says on the outside. They just taste like the actual fruit. They're so delicious. It's ridiculous.
Well, I think that's enough of your shameless plugging.
Sorry,
now.
but they're really nice. They're so good. I mean, I don't know if I try and make them, I don't know if they'll be as good, obviously, but because I'm not a professional marshmallowist, but you can have a go. So there we are. So that is my shameless plugging over, and I'll promise I'll talk about something that isn't published by the company I work for next week. I promise.
After that delightful evening hosted by Vintage,
it was very nice
at Waterstones, we did head out in the evening.
Yes, we did.
Caught out with some of our fellow book bloggers. Mm-hmm. So let's see if I remember before. So we had Nina, who is Matinee Girl on Twitter. Eric.
Notes from the Chair is her blog.
I got Eric, who is at Lonesome Reader.
Yeah, and which is also his blog.
Then we had Kim, Reading Matters, Kimbo Foe on Twitter. Mm-hmm. Simon, Savage Reads. He arrived fashionably late.
Yeah.
Even more fashionably late then was Gav, at Gav Reads. He'd been at the Terry Pratchett Memorial Service.
Yeah. And then also Naomi, who's at Frisbot, and her blog is The Rights of Women, was at the Waterstones evening with us, although sadly couldn't join us later on.
We had a nice meal. We had a good old chinwag and a catch-up. It was nice to sort of hang out, have some bookish chats with some people who we don't often get to see very often.
It was really lovely.
Yeah.
It's really good. So thank you very much, everyone, bloggers, for coming. And it was really nice to have a catch-up and have some good bookish chat with everybody.
So that was our rather busy week.
Yeah, it's been a bit hectic, but good.
Yes, managed to get a lot in, and completely unrelated, but then went to a Muse gig on the Friday night. So
yeah, although I have to say, Adventures of Where we do say we cover storytelling in all its forms, and there's some extraordinary storytelling going on there. I did feel a bit like I was back at Secret Cinema again.
Yes.
With they definitely do some amazing storytelling. There's a lot of almost that sort of dystopia and definitely feeling of science fiction and lots of use of interesting words and narrative in there. So, and brilliant visuals as well. So I felt like there was a lot of storytelling going on there. It's not totally unrelated.
Well, I'll put some pictures up of the Muse gig on my Flickr, and I will tweet that out. So that is it for this week. You can get in touch with us in a number of ways. You can send us an email, contact@adventureswithwords.com. We are on Twitter @WordAdventures. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/adventureswithwords. We are also on Tumblr. And I think that's all.
I think so. I'll be collecting up my live tweets that I did from Adventures with Words from the Waterstones evening on Wednesday. I did mention on Twitter just recently that I'm following the shortlist for the YA Book Prize with my good friend Darren, who's a Waterstones bookseller. I think we'll be putting those on Adventures with Words, but I'll find out more about that, and I'm sure I'll tweet the details shortly from my own Twitter or from Word Adventures, or probably both. So I'll keep you updated with what happens with that. But yeah, that's it for now until next week.
Yeah, I've been Rob. You can follow me during the week on Twitter, Instagram, and on Snapchat @RobChilver.
And you can follow me during the week on Twitter and Instagram @magic_kitten.
Thank you for listening.